Hello again. Right, in this video I'm going to talk about a research proposal and a thesis statement. And in this document, which looks like this, I've called it the research proposal and thesis statement. It talks about here on this page 1D, drafting a research proposal. So a research proposal basically is just for your own purposes, really. It says here, a research proposal is a short paragraph that identifies four essential ingredients of your work. One, the purpose of the paper. Really, it is to analyze and argue, really, explaining the introduction. But number two, the intended audience, general or specialized. Well, it's me, basically. You're trying to argue a certain point to me. Three, your voice as a writer. Well, you're trying to argue the point on any topic. Four, the preliminary thesis, sentence, or opening hypothesis. It's a thesis statement. I'm going to talk about that later. Okay, so please read this document before this video. On the next page it says explaining your purpose in the research paper. So research papers accomplish different tasks. They explain and define the topic. Yes, you do that in the introduction. They analyze the specific issues, of course. They persuade the reader with the weight of evidence. Yes, they do. And you're supposed to explain the point you're trying to prove. You're trying to prove the thesis statement in 2 body paragraphs. Then you sum up with a conclusion. Okay. It talks about more about that there. I'm just going to move on to the next page, and it says identifying the audience of your research proposal. Well, I've said before, well, that is me, but you've got to imagine it's an academic audience who know quite a lot about the subject, but they want to be persuaded that your argument is correct. Yeah, and you've got to explain that as much as possible. So identifying your role as a researcher in the proposal, well, yes, you're trying to persuade the reader, as I said before, that you are right. Expressing your thesis. Now, this is important, expressing your thesis, sentence, or statement in the research proposal. So here it says a thesis sentence expands your topic into a scholarly proposal, one that you will try to prove and defend in your paper. It does not state the obvious. For example, the statement that too much television is harmful to children will not provoke an academic discussion because your readers already know that an excess of anything is harmful, even chocolate or coffee maybe. Who knows? But they say coffee and chocolate are good anyway. But the writer must narrow and isolate one issue by finding a critical focus. The following is a much improved thesis sentence from a certain perspective. Yes, so here we have violence in children's programming echoes an adolescent's fascination with brutality. This sentence advances an idea that the writer can develop fully and defend with the evidence. The writer has made a connection between television violence and focusing agent adolescent psychology. Look at 3 more examples. So the elasticity of children's eyes makes it perfectly safe for them to sit close to the television screen. Television cartoons can affect a child's attitude toward violence. Objectivity can never be perfectly presented by any television broadcast or perceived by any viewer. So you can take different approaches depending on what angle you want to approach it with. So you can have a social approach. For example, public support of safe houses for battered wives seems to be public endorsement of divorce. You can have a psychological approach. The masochism of some women traps them in a marriage of painful love. You could have a biological approach. Battered wives may be the victims of their own biological conditioning. So here are some, on this page, some examples of thesis statements from different approaches, and you're supposed to get your own approach. But to do that, if we go on to the next page, it says narrowing the general subject to a specific topic. The more you narrow it down to a specific topic, the better. Much better. If it's too general, then it's no good. You got to get it, and your background reading will help you to narrow down the topic. So it says here, narrowing and focusing with comparison topics. So it says here, historians compare Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant. Political scientists compare Bill Clinton and George Bush. Literary scholars compare John Keats and Thomas Hardy. We did comparison and contrast before. Any two works, any two persons, any two groups may serve as the basis for a comparative study. And then here it says restricting and narrowing with disciplinary interests. So if it's, and you probably won't write about literature, but if you do, then you can, narrow it down to imagery, setting, plot, symbolism, irony, structure, theme, character, genre. So anything can be narrowed down to a certain perspective, any, well, many different perspectives, can't they? So the idea is you choose a topic, narrow it down, look at it from a certain perspective, whether it's the historical, political, for example, or I don't know, a media angle, or psychological angle, a sociological angle, or whatever. But whatever you do, you need to have a good thesis statement. That I've given you some examples before, but let's think about this document here. This is a document I created about a thesis statement. It is meant to be a comprehensive view of what a thesis statement should be. It's not just an idea or describing what your paper is about. It's telling the reader what you're trying to prove, really. In one detailed sentence. So I've got like 3 minutes left of this video, so let's quickly go through this. So 1, a proposition that you will analyze and try to prove in your paper. It states what you believe is true and that you will defend this position in the research paper. Therefore, you need enough evidence through your research to be able to support your thesis statement. Therefore, each body paragraph should attempt to prove a different aspect of the thesis statement, but be careful that you do not repeat yourself. So each body paragraph is trying to prove the thesis statement. The thesis statement should is an expansion. The body paragraphs are an expansion of the thesis statement. The whole paper is an expansion of the thesis statement. Number 2, it controls and focuses the entire paper. Number 3, it gives order to the details of the research paper by providing unity and a sense of direction. Number 4, it tells the reader the point of the research. Number 5, it is not a question, not a statement of purpose, not an aim, and not merely a topic. Number 6, it limits the subject to a narrow focus that grows from a certain theoretical perspective and from your own research. Very good. Number 7, it establishes an inventive edge to the discovery, interpretation, or theoretical presentation. Number 8, it points forward to a conclusion. Number 9, it has an investigative edge which you can analyze and prove. It should not lead you to write a purely descriptive research paper, the content of which is readily available on the internet. We're not writing a descriptive paper here, not describing anything. You're trying to prove something, and the thesis statement is the thing that you are trying to prove. You tell the reader what you're trying to prove, and then you expand on that, and through your argumentation and explanation you try to prove the research paper. So I often say the research paper is like a black hole. If you ever look up into the sky, you might see a black hole, but you can't because they're very, very black. Okay, you won't see them, but imagine that. But what it means is the whole research paper, like a solar system, can be squeezed into the one sentence of the thesis statement. But then later black holes regurgitate that, they spew it out, and when through your writing you write it all out from the thesis statement and try to explain that more fully, a bit like Zhigi na podwodza. Zhigi na podwodza. I'm joking really, but don't worry. But you try to prove it. It all comes out with the thesis statement, spews out. Yes, and you try to prove that thesis statement. So the thesis statement is the research paper, and the research paper is the thesis statement, basically. So that is as much as I wanted to say there. Thank you.